Welcome everybody to this video. We're going to be flying the Colimata Concorde with the Early Access Autopilot from France to Santa Maria, which is just off the coast of Portugal and was used as a refueling point during Concorde flights on its way to South America. So the Concorde is parked up here at Charles de Gaulle Airport with all its nice ground handling equipment around it. So let's jump inside and let's go flying. So the first thing we need to do is disconnect our ground handling. So we'll remove all the trucks, all the stairs, and we're also going to close the doors of the aircraft. Then we'll be ready to start the plane and get on our way to Santa Maria. With the ground handling removed, we can call up our flight engineer and ask him to start the aircraft systems. So initially, all the instruments run through a little test program, and then he'll go on to flick all the necessary switches in the background, which you can't flick yourself yet, which is why you have to get the engineer to do it for you. And after he's done that, he will start the engines and you'll be ready to get on your way. With the engine started, we can head over to the UI and load our flight plan into the INS. So that's a matter of just going load, finding an FMS file and hitting commit. You can load plans into the SIVA INS waypoint by waypoint, just like you would in real life, but ain't nobody got time for that. So we will set our airport altimeter. We're going to set our ILS frequency for where we're going, and we'll also need to set the course of the ILS and our destination. Although I'm not too sure it makes a difference in this plane at the moment. We're going to set our initial altitude, which is 29,000 feet, so we'll climb up there at subsonic speed and then we'll accelerate through Mach 1. We're also going to check our initial speed, 250 knots. And with that complete, it's time to push back.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect. Tow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the right. We'll see you next time on other side flight.
And let's drop that nose, ready for taxi. And off we go, a short taxi to the runway and we can take off. The Concorde taxis really easily under kind of idle thrust, and it's really easy to control as well. So lined up on the runway, we're just going to check our fuel very quickly, which can be found in aircraft status. About 1700 nautical miles. Our flight today is about 1400, so we should be fine. We can also ask our flight engineer to trim the fuel tanks for takeoff, and we'll set the nose to 5 degrees for our takeoff as well. I'm also going to flick on these auto throttle switches. I'm not sure it makes a difference in the plane yet, but I figure we're going to be using the auto throttle, so we'll switch them on. Setting that initial vertical speed to about 2,000 feet per minute of climb. Alright, it's time for takeoff, so we'll bring those throttles up to full.
Airspeed building. 100 knots. Power set. V1. Rotate. V2. Positive
So with the gear up, we'll go airspeed acquire and auto throttle on, INS active, vertical speed mode on, and we'll turn on the flight director and our autopilot, and we'll also bring that nose up. We'll also get the fuel trimmed for flight.
Fuel trim to flight. 3, 2, 1, noise.
And that's it, we are flying. We've got Concorde in the air.
3,000 feet. Consider noise abatement procedure.
And we'll get that altimeter to standards.
Feet. 10,000 feet. Optimum subsonic cruise at 28,000 feet. Max 0.95. Reheat off.
So at 10,000 we can increase our speed to 300 knots and we'll hit airspeed acquire to get us there as we continue our subsonic climb to 29,000 feet. So here's our INS showing our progress. We're about 1,300 miles away and about 190 minutes. You'll notice the INS is in direct 2 mode, and I'll explain why a little bit later. So we're close to 29,000 feet. We will go altitude acquire, and as soon as the plane hits 29,000, we'll enter altitude hold mode and it will level off. Now we've leveled off, we're setting our speed to 396 knots. That will take us beyond the sound barrier at 29,000 feet, and then we can climb all the way up to 60,000.
Mach 1 passed.
And that's it, we are supersonic.
Mach
So
overspeed warning. Throttle
the
Mach
overspeed
applied.
warning is a little bit sensitive, but we're fine, we're still below that yellow tape. We're going to increase our altitude all the way up to 60,000 feet. We're going to increase the vertical speed to 6,000 feet per minute.
feet. Consider reheat usage for supersonic climb.
And now we'll continue climbing and climbing and climbing, 6,000 feet per minute, all the way up to 60,000. By that time, we'll be doing about Mach 2, and we'll be able to cruise. And there it is, guys, 60,000 feet, Mach 2. We are cruising, supersonic cruise in Concorde. So while we're here, let me just explain that stuff about the INS. So if you include the departure airport in your flight plan, sometimes the INS won't recognise that it's left the airport, it's past that point, if the latitude and longitude of the runway are sort of separate to the lat long of the airport itself. That's not a bug, it's not an issue with the plane, it's just the way an INS works. So if you see your distance and time remaining climbing as you leave the airport, just stick the INS in direct 2 mode to your destination. That can be done by pressing waypoint change, the numbers 0 and the number of the waypoint you want to go to, hit insert, and you'll be on your way to the correct place. I will see you at the top of descent. We are near top of descent, so we're going to start preparing. We're setting the altitude to 10,000 feet, and we'll also prepare our vertical speed to minus 2,000 feet per minute for the descent. We'll also finally set our airspeed for descent to 300 knots, which will take us back through the sound barrier on our descent. So here we are at the top of descent. We'll go vertical speed mode, airspeed acquire, and
trim to descent.
Trim our fuel for descent. And that's it, we are subsonic, about 35,000 feet, still on our way down. So we're pretty close to the airport, we're now going into track heading mode.
Caution. Fuel status 5 tons. We are out of fuel. We need to land immediately.
The co-pilot cries about out of fuel a little bit early, we'll be fine. But we've gone into track heading to intercept the localizer or the VOR beacon at least to point us at the airport. We're now going to slow down to 250 knots as well as we've reached 10,000 feet. Also going to dial in our final descent here, which will take us down to about 2,500. We'll acquire that speed and go vertical speed mode down to 2,500 feet at 2,000 feet per minute. So the nose is coming down now to about 5 degrees. And we're in altitude acquire mode because we're very close to our final descent height of 2,500. And it's now time to dial in our final approach speed of 190 knots. So we'll get that in and we'll go acquire airspeed. Don't want to turn the localizer on too early like I've just done, or it won't acquire it properly. So we're going to go back into track heading mode and we'll intercept the localizer when we're a little bit closer. Of course, nose to full for landing.
Fuel trim. Should I change
and gear is
3,
now down.
2, 1, noise.
Changing the fuel trim over to landing
fuel
mode.
trim to landing.
So we're going into Localiser Capture mode. One thing about this plane at the moment, it doesn't capture the localizer as such, it just turns towards the VOR beacon of the localizer.
Noise.
So you can't really fly a proper ILS approach, there's no vertical guidance yet as well. But what it does do is point you at the runway for a visual landing, which, you know, they did in Concorde all the time, so it's not unrealistic as such.
Autopilot off.
And that's it, we're on final, we've got the airfield in sight, autopilot is off, and we're going for a full visual manual landing here in Santa Maria. So the runway is sort of off to our right, so we're just rolling right a little bit so we can fly alongside the runway. I guess almost as if you're intercepting a localizer, and then we're going to turn left back in until we're straight on with the runway here. So that's it, runway in sight, we're nicely lined up. We're going to sort of follow the PAPI system here, but I always like to approach a little bit low. There's nothing worse than coming in too high and suddenly having to pitch the nose down violently. If you look at my old videos, I used to do that a lot. So here we are, we'll hear the callouts now as we approach the edge of the runway, which is
500 feet.
kind of on the edge of a hill or a cliff.
100 feet. 300. 200.
Swaying left and right a little bit, trying to keep it straight.
Throttle off.
Auto throttle's now off. Background throttle off.
Deploy.
Getting the reversers on in the air just to push us down
10.
because it does like to float.
Retard.
And there we go.
Contact.
200-ish feet per minute. Happy days. Welcome everybody to
Reverser retracted.
Santa Maria. We'll clean up the autopilot here and we'll make our way off the runway. So now we've parked up here, all we really have to do is ask the flight engineer to switch everything off, and you hear the engines start to spool down, and that's all you have to do. You've got a flight engineer, he starts the plane for you, he shuts down the plane, all you have to do is load a flight plan and fly it. Very easy. So we'll get the ground handling up again, admire the Concorde, and then we'll take in some replays. So everybody, I do hope you enjoyed your tutorial of the Colimata Concorde with its early access autopilot. This was the update that made me buy the plane personally, because it's now flyable in a realistic way with the autopilot. Obviously the ILS and Autoland stuff is still to come, but at the moment I'm happy to make a completely visual landing. So it is time for those landing replays. And that brings us to the end of this video. Once again, thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on the Colimata Concorde? Is it currently worth the money? Are you holding out for ILS? Or are you still a fan of sort of FS Labs and P3D Concorde?
20.
Until next time guys,
Retard.
remember,
10.
you can always go around. Take care.